In this video, I'm going to be talking about creating and maintaining your personal peace. So let's get started. I've been working on creating and maintaining my personal peace since childhood because I was born with a highly sensitive personality, which just means that I feel things much more deeply than someone that doesn't have a highly sensitive personality. Books have been written on highly sensitive personalities. I'm not going to go into that. But needless to say, it's easy for anyone who's highly sensitive to become overwhelmed in situations much faster than someone who isn't highly sensitive. So even from childhood, I've had to kind of work out how to create my own peace and maintain my own peace. Added to that, my life's been a bit of a roller coaster with many highs and lows and some traumatic lows. Both my parents died in the same year, and then shortly after that, one of our children died. So the grief trauma was kind of off the scale. And if you add to that situation the high sensitivity, you can imagine how devastating that was. I've also travelled to many countries and met many people in different cultures, and all that, especially when you're highly sensitive, can be overwhelming. I worked in social work for 10 years and I was a church minister for 30 years, and then slightly overlapping that, I was the CEO of an international charity that did some teaching, and also poverty relief was the main thing that we spent the money on. I guess it could even be the number one thing today that people are looking for is personal peace. Sometimes we express that slightly differently. We might say, I just want to be happy. Why can't I be happy is a phrase I've heard a few times. But happiness is a feeling, and humans encounter lots of different feelings throughout each day, really. So the idea that you could just be unhappy all the time is a bit unrealistic. But I think what people mean is they just don't want the stress. They just want a way of feeling personal peace. And sometimes we find it, but quite often it doesn't last very long. It's a bit fleeting. So today I want to give you some steps that I've taken personally, so I know they work, steps that will help you create and maintain personal peace. And I'm going to split my thoughts into three sections: the physical, the mental, and the spiritual, or you could say body, mind, and spirit. We talk about body, mind, and spirit. And sometimes people talk about body, mind, and spirit as though those are three separate entities or three separate things. And in one way they are, but they're all interconnected. If something's going wrong in your body, it's going to affect your mental health and your spiritual health. If something's wrong in the mental arena, it could affect your physical health and your spiritual health. And, they all overlap and they all affect each other. But I'm splitting them out simply because it's a big subject how we find peace, and we do create peace, or we can create peace and maintain peace in those three areas of the physical or the body, the mind or the mental, and the spirit or spiritual. And quite often, if you don't have the tools or the experience of creating personal peace, then what people do is only focus on the physical ways you can get personal peace. And they are important, and we're going to talk about those in this video in a moment. But you can also go deeper with your mental peace and your spiritual peace. But let's focus now on the physical peace. So I guess creating peace 101 is simply taking steps to look at your life. Do a little audit of your life. Are you always around drama queens? There are some people that love drama and crisis and creating problems and stirring everyone up. And those people will not allow you peace. They will disturb your peace. So the very simple thing is, if you want personal peace in your life, you really have to limit being around those people. As far as it's up to you, or certainly in my case, as far as it is up to me, I disconnect from drama queens. I don't want their drama. I haven't got time for that. Life's too short. And it's all froth and bubble. It's all nonsense. It always is. Obviously, it should go without saying if there are people in your life who are manipulators and, complete narcissists. You really don't want those people in your life, or you really want to limit their access to your personal space. I just don't have anything to do with people that start manipulating or any of that kind of stuff. And then there might be toxic work environments. All these things are external to us, and we don't always have control over the whole thing. But we do have to, like if you're in a toxic work environment, you need to really ask the question, do you want to stay in the toxic work environment? And begin to plan a strategy to get out of that toxic work environment, because that's not good for anyone, and it's just not sustainable if you want peace in your life. But now I really want to talk about the physical, but the internal. This is something we do have some control over. And one of the things that surprised me, I would say about 12 years ago, I started realising that food and drink and exercise and those types of things, or lack of exercise, those things were really affecting me, not only affecting me negatively in a physical way, but in turn, as a follow-on from that, they were affecting my personal peace. Obviously, the older you get, the more you really need to think about what exercise you take in. I mean, it's a good thing to focus on for the whole of your life, but certainly if you're over 40, you need to think about what exercise you're getting, and just up that. If you're not taking much exercise, if you're not going for a walk at all, go for a walk for half an hour or an hour. If you're not walking at all, go for a walk around the block, commit to it once a day. If you're already doing something like that, walk into the shops or something like that, then think about going on a countryside walk, just walking a bit further a few times a week. For me, I was already doing a hike a couple of times a week, so I was taking some exercise, but I did have some days where I wasn't taking much. And so I did something I thought I'd never do, and this is just one way of doing it. I joined a gym class. The step that made it easier was that my mate was the leader of the gym class. And so I kind of had a way into it. That me going to a gym class is like, you won't believe how incredible that was, because the thought of me ever doing that, I can't believe I've done it. And I've done that for about 10 years. So that's one possibility. But just getting out and going for a walk is more exercise. But me going to a weekly gym class really began to change my physical abilities and actually brought more peace. Sometimes the things that are troubling us are, we feel them physically. For example, grief. When I lost a lot of family members, that grief, you feel it in your body. And the worst thing you can do is just lock yourself away at home and sit still, because that grief just hangs there. It's horrible. It's a horrible feeling. And it's like grief when you lose someone like that. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't bring them back. And it's horrible. But so if you feel in the grief in your body, one way I discovered to ease that pain is move. Just do some movement. Move to exercise, move to walk, just push yourself a little bit further, because as you're moving, your body is processing the physical pain of grief or sadness or whatever it is. And then 10 to 12 years ago, I just observed the fact that I wasn't really coping with life, and my strategies, which I hadn't really thought through, my strategies for bringing a bit of peace in that area were really bad strategies. And you may be doing some of these. So if I felt, miserable and lethargic in the morning, I'd crank myself up on caffeine. And I did that virtually every day, chain drinking caffeine through to sort of early afternoon. But what that did, because partly exacerbated by the fact that I'm highly sensitive, it cranked up the jitters and the irritability. And so I found myself drinking in the evening to kind of block out the feelings of irritation and the jitters really from the caffeine. And that then led, the more you do that, then led to a sort of mild hangover in the morning, which you then use caffeine for. And that was a that was a horrible cycle. But I convinced myself for several years that that was a good coping mechanism. But on this day, about 10 to 12 years ago, whenever that was, I had this thought that I was spending a lot of time, effort and money trying to keep this peace to block out the pain. And the radical thought was, what if I create a life that I don't want to escape from? So instead of using all these really bad coping mechanisms to escape from life, why not just create a life that I didn't want to escape from? So the first thing I did was quit caffeine. Now, if you are going to struggle quitting caffeine, I'm probably not the person to talk to you about that, because I didn't find it that difficult. Obviously, like everyone else that drinks too much caffeine, I was addicted to it, and the first couple of days were really difficult. All I wanted to do was drink strong coffee with caffeine in it. But I didn't do that. But there's something about caffeine for me that once I decided I was going to quit caffeine, I did it. And in fact, I quit caffeine for a couple of years, some years back, a couple of decades ago. So I kind of done that before, so I didn't find that very difficult. But I know when I made this video about why I quit caffeine, a lot of people said they couldn't imagine quitting caffeine. They'd have to have at least 1 cup in the morning. So that's something you need to work through. I'm just telling you what I did. So I quit caffeine, and that really brought a calmness, and that laid a foundation for my next step of creating a life I didn't want to escape from. A couple of years after quitting caffeine, I quit alcohol, and that was difficult for me. That was much harder than quitting caffeine. That was a struggle, and it took about 5 attempts to do that. I quit, for a week or two here and there. And then I quit for 3 months. I quit for 9 months, but always kind of went back. But I had my last drink over 7 years ago, and there's no way I'm ever going back. And I know some people say you shouldn't say that, live one day at a time. But I can tell you I've had lots of stressful situations, and it's never once crossed my mind to go back to that, because of the peace I got when I quit alcohol, as I worked through the steps of quitting caffeine, quitting alcohol, and doing some of the things that I'm sharing with you today. Now, if you want to quit alcohol and you have problems with that, I've got some resources on my website, egan.life/recovery. Lots of free ones on there, but also some paid ones. And I'm sure you'll find something on there that will help you if you've decided you want to quit alcohol, but you're struggling to know how to do that. And then the next thing I did, which is a bit of a process, I started looking at what food I was eating. So I was eating high sugar content, a lot of processed food, a lot of unhealthy food. And so I began to scale back the processed food and the stuff with sugar in. I would say those were the main 2 things. And then I wanted to lose a little bit of weight, but talking about food, this is not dietary advice in the sense if you want to lose a couple of pounds. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having peace, that your body is attuned to just living in peace. Instead of fluctuating all the time, you can live on a sort of level playing field. And yeah, there's some ups and downs, but not the sort of big ups and downs with some food that you can eat. So for me, I really minimise potatoes and bread, just because I noticed those were the 2 things that if I had them in my diet would cause bloating and stomach discomfort. And I eliminated bread and potatoes pretty much 100% for a few weeks, and I rarely have them even now. And I just find everything, the digestion and everything, and the way I feel is a lot better. The problem with bread these days is it's not like the bread of old days made by an independent baker, or most of it isn't, but supermarket bread. It's got all sorts of additives and preservatives in, and they're really not good for your body. And I think they cause a lot more problems than we give them credit for. But also, I just started reading the ingredients on packets. So I was already doing the cooking. I'm the main cook at home. And so I started just learning how to make stuff from scratch. And if I wanted a tomato and basil sauce, I'd make it with some tomatoes and a few other ingredients. And I knew that it wasn't piled with sugar or preservatives because it was just made with natural ingredients. And you can get recipes of how to do all this online. We've got a thing called the internet. It's not that difficult, you just learn how to do it. So I would say those 3 things that I did changed my piece, and then they were all physical things: quitting caffeine, quitting alcohol, and then looking at diet and getting rid of processed food, or most processed food, and most bread and most potatoes. So the way I do it, I do this thing called the 80-20 rule, okay? So that you may just crave something, that you really like to eat. You may just crave some potatoes or some bread or something, that's a bit processed. So the way you handle that is the 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time you don't eat these things, and then you allow only up to 20% of the diet to do that. Hopefully you can get that down to 10 or 5, or completely don't bother, live like a monk. But if you've got something you crave for that you can't do without food-wise, just eat it like no more than once a week in small amounts. And those 3 main things, quitting the caffeine, quitting alcohol, and sorting what I was eating out, and doing a food diary, that was the other thing I did, that brought some physical calm, that brought some physical peace, because everything we eat and drink, that affects how we feel. It affects our mental well-being, how we feel about life. So those are the 3 things in the physical realm. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how we create and maintain peace in the mental realm, how we create and maintain peace in our mind. And you can watch that video here.